Thanks for being on Attribution Time today. I'm stoked to have you on the call. You and I met as we worked with a client through some marketing attribution. But what do you got going on in your world? What are you up to nowadays?
Yeah, well, so with digital pie now kind of in the rear view, I set out to start thinking about, well, what's the next great, problem to go solve? There's so many of them in this world, as you know. Um, and I reflected back on like the decade of digital pie and started thinking like, well, we did all this great work. We solved a lot of great problems, but I never felt when I look back, I'm like, did it ever really yield big results? Like, did it, can I really say like we did this thing and it moved the needle for the business? And I said, well, huh. And the things that surfaced were a couple of things. One is just the quality and availability of data to fuel
Mm-hmm.
marketing and fuel attribution is a challenge, a big one, and everybody knows it. And that's one. But the other one that I like a lot is targeting, because if everybody wants to personalize, who are you going to personalize to?
Mm-hmm.
Which accounts, what kinds of accounts, how are you going to segment them? Who are the buyers at that account and that segment that you need to focus on? Because if you can just do even a little bit of improvement on targeting, and you can get sales and marketing on the same page, and then you can do this iteratively over time because markets change, think of how much more effective you're going to be. You're going to have better conversions. Everything goes better. The old joke, everything goes better with Coke. Everything goes better with great targeting, right down
Yeah.
to the buying committee. So that's what we're
Well,
playing with.
and when you got into the space, 10 plus years ago, one of the biggest changes in that is the access to data. Kind of what you opened up with, like the amount of data points in which we have available to us now is just completely different than 10, 15 years ago. I mean, it's just wildly different. And obviously that's part of that change just with the internet, and the growth of all of those things. But I mean, it's pretty crazy to think about what's accessible at people's fingertips to be able to do all of those things.
It is, and that's a really good point. The volume of data, the frequency of data changing and updating, the kinds of data you can play with. The problem isn't, is there a data that can be useful? The problem is which ones and how do I make it useful all the time? So, for
Hmm.
example, if you think about like what is the B2B go to for, the world of people, it's LinkedIn. And
Yeah.
so you think about LinkedIn and how things change up there. I mean, what does it mean if you can start to understand people and harvest the insights about people as they're working on LinkedIn toward figuring out about buyers? Because most of those people are going to be your buyers too. So data of all kinds, unstructured data, unlimited data. I think the problem isn't the fact that the data is there. How do you make it trusted? How do you make it usable? Which data should you use? How often should you refresh it? So yeah, the world of data is nothing like it was back in the early Marketo days. It's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in the early Marketo days, you had to progressively profile people to get these data points, to like you're asking them to get all these things. You had to gate all this content, and we're far past that now. We can get all those data points by going to LinkedIn, getting all of that into our system, and we've moved past all the things then which we were trying to profile them
Yeah.
with.
Yeah, and if you can imagine data, well, let's think out of the box. What other kinds of data are out there now? Well, there's Gong, right? You
Hmm.
got all that threaded conversation insight happening out there from salespeople and with prospects and customers. You can harvest that data too. So there's no
Yeah.
limit anymore. It's like you just got to be smart how you're going to use it and which ones you're going to use. Yeah.
Well, this isn't data time. This is attribution time. So
Yeah.
let's dive into that. To your point, there's part of marketing attribution and doing attribution correctly is choosing the correct data points. It's not to say, here's every single data point and let's figure out how we can attribute to it. It's being very prescriptive with it, not just marketing, but sales and other points of engagement to say, okay, what is the best journey here that is taking place for us to understand the buyer process for new or existing business and things of that sort. So one thing could be, one nightmare could be, having bad data and not being able to properly do attribution. What are some of the challenges that you face working with enterprise organizations as they try to do attribution?
Man, I think I'm just going to kind of rattle off the things that stand out in my mind. One is my conclusion finally was like it almost doesn't matter which attribution model you choose. It's more about how are you interpreting it and how are you getting everybody else to believe it and interpret it. It's
Hmm.
much more of a human problem than it is a technology data problem. And you and I encountered that when we were working together, and
Yeah.
we talked about it and we raised it up with the company, and they agreed. So to me, you got to. My philosophy is you start with, it isn't as much a technology data problem. First and foremost, it's what is your plan to put this data to work, because you're going to face a crowd of skeptics. I mean, thinking back on some of
Yep.
the experiences I had sitting in a room with a VP of sales, VP of marketing, they're at war. They're at war with each other literally for 6 months because, one side doesn't believe the attribution the other one's sharing with them. And
Hmm.
it turned out that there just wasn't any time put into explaining the model and what it meant. It was just assumed that somebody's going to buy into it and understand it. So I start there with just the human side of attribution.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that is well, even the human side of attribution and the not it's not about the modeling, right? It's that there's an alignment and there's an agreement about what model you choose, but it is not like this model is going to go in. So you're going to go off and buy this XYZ tool because it has this model and that's going to answer all of our questions. It's like, no, you just need, as long as there's alignment in how you measure and define success, attribution can be done well. But that's
Yes.
the core value, right? It's not about all the different models that come with the tool or anything like that. And I think that's a really good point.
It's the human element, man. I mean, right down to, let's just think about it for a minute. What is marketing reports often are going to tell you, they're going to reflect what you did. So if you spend all your money on events, 90% of your money goes to events and 10% goes to paid, whatever. When you run those reports, guess what's going to look more dominant because that's where your activity is going. And so people, to you and I, because this is what we do, that seems so obvious, of course.
Yeah.
But you start showing this stuff to just like any Joe B2B salesperson, whatever, they're gonna be like, look at that. Such and such is crushing it. Why are we wasting our money on such and such? So if you don't plan for that ahead of time, and I
Yeah.
know you've been there, I know I've been there, it can really blow up on you. So the tools and the tech are fantastic. To me, it still starts with like, what is your plan to like, what are you really going to do with this data? How are you going to roll this out?
Yeah. Yeah. And to your point, also like start having those conversations with sales and marketing in the buying process. Not because so more often than not, it's, marketing buys this product and then, buys the attribution tool. And then we're like, well, let's bring in sales touch points. And then we bring in sales and start talking to them. And they're not aware of anything of, what you're trying to do. And then it creates some red flags. And so just being a part of that conversation from the get-go of how do we define success and how do we help accelerate more deals and work alongside you. I think that's a big, big piece. What are some other gotchas that you might see within marketing attribution that you run into?
Some of these you're familiar with, contacts, associated opportunities.
Yeah, yeah,
So attribution is really such a simple idea. It's like we're going to go find a path. We're going to go find a path from our marketing stuff to dollars. It's a worthwhile endeavor for sure, but it's only as good as if you got good line of sight to the people that are associated to those deals. And as you know, nowadays, if you're going to go look at a B2B deal, you're going to have two, three, four, five, 10 people on it. And if you don't have line of sight to those 10 people, and there's technology to help you fix that, but man, even with the tech out there, companies still drop the ball on it. So having just there's one common one is like, do you have the right people associated to that deal so that you can make good connections back into the marketing? That's a big one. And you think that that would have been solved by now. It's been
yeah,
around forever. And you probably see it too. It's not solved yet.
yeah, yeah. That is the quintessential one. I mean, that we used to joke around about it. Like anyone who says that they're doing contact roles, they're not really doing it correctly. I mean, that was just the expectation. Like it was so hard to actually get done. And yeah, I'm curious where AI will take us with that though. Where rather than having contact roles specifically where sales is defining it, but you could so here's the deal cycle, and then you can run it against certain job titles. You can run it against, engagement within the time frame of the deal. So if let's say it's a deal that took 300 days to close, but you only want to look at the last 120 days and look at which job titles are involved, and then you could attribute back to those things, right? Rather than defining a very specific person or contact role, but using things of that sort to understand the buyer's process. I think that'd be an interesting concept there.
I think it's bound to happen sooner than we think
Yeah.
because the AI stuff is moving fast, and more and more people are figuring out how to apply it in practical use cases and situations. When you think about our world of attribution and you think about sales and marketing, I can't think of anything more ripe for an application. And what you just described, the ability to just go, hey, can you go look at this sample set of data and tell me something about the buyers and who I should be thinking about? I don't think that's that far out.
No. Yeah, having a closed data set like that and just being able to ingest it into whatever form you have of AI, and then be able to run against that, to give you an output of what most common denominators are there of job titles or web page engagements, what pages are getting the most hits, things of that sort. Yeah, I don't think we're too far out at all. I think it's really interesting. What are some fun things that you're working on within AI as of right now?
I'm kind of split my time. There's two spins on AI that I'm looking at. We're playing with. One is the idea that what if you made it easy for anybody, any person, you, me, we don't have to be data scientists, we don't have to be anything like that. What if anybody could go take any of their unstructured data and just immediately make it available and accessible in a tool, an LLM like ChatGPT? So let's think about that a minute. I mean, what does that mean? You could go take the entire Marketo community and pretty easily feed all that knowledge into chat GPT, and suddenly anybody can prompt it. It just makes the data much more usable. That's just one example. And so the whole idea that you can take unstructured data, which, don't forget, is about 80% of the data on the planet right now, and any idiot like me can go make it available to chat GPT. That's something to think about. So that's one angle. The other one is just finding where AI is being practically applied in tools. And so Adobe's no exception to that, right? It's working AI into their tools just like every vendor is.
Yeah.
And so the one that I've come across that I think is interesting is AI and data science being applied to studying databases, and the databases are people. So what happens if you can apply intelligent thought to data from LinkedIn, data from this place, that place about people? This is kind of what we were talking about before. What might it identify if you give it a set of people or a population of accounts or people, and you let some kind of intelligent body look for the commonality that really matters in that set of data, and it can tell me, it's like, hey, you just gave me these 20 companies, or you just gave me these 500 people. Here are the three things that are the most common attributes that are showing up about those people. That caught my attention. And so
That's
that's
interesting.
on AI that I'm messing with, is like, I want to see what it can tell me about sets of data that I can't see myself.
Yeah, do forecasting with it in a sense of being able to kind of look into the future based upon, this open source data, what's the commonality, and be able to actually forecast and say, okay, I'm going to try to get ahead of these clients and try to do these things before they're even trying to do it, because this is the common path. This is what's happening here.
Yeah, it's coming so fast, and for you and me, my point of reference, I go back to Marketo, when it was first out, that was the miracle product.
Yeah.
The product, man. I mean, even its attribution, RCE, which is still around,
Yeah.
that thing was so far ahead of its time. It
Yep.
was so far ahead of its time that it was hard to sell and support it. When I was working at Marketo in product marketing, they talked about a get well program for it. And it wasn't because the product was bad.
Yeah.
It's because it was such a leap for marketers to start even thinking about attribution. And it seems like a long time ago, but it wasn't that long ago.
No, RCE is actually very powerful, and it's a great foundation to attribution. And I think it's something that's often missed within most Marketo users. Yeah, it's a solid one. Well, very good stuff, Tom. Thanks for being on Attribution Time today. This was awesome.
Oh, my pleasure. I enjoyed it. Good chatting with you, Ian.